Hey, Paul.
Hey Sam, what's going on?
Not much. Nice
How
to
was
be back doing another episode.
Yeah, we took a little break because of the holidays, and it's great to be back on the Generation Gap podcast. Yeah,
Absolutely. We got a
yeah,
really cool episode today that I'm very excited
yeah.
about.
I know we've been talking about doing this episode probably since we first started talking about doing a podcast. I think it kind of came up when we first were sort of like texting back and forth about the idea of a podcast. I remember you were like, "Well, we have to do something about Coldplay," and I was like, "We'd have to do something about Coldplay."
Yeah.
I'm actually kind of surprised we waited this long, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I am too, but I'm happy we're finally doing it, and this is going to be a really interesting episode because we both have a bit of a history with this band,
Definitely.
a very complicated history.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Um,
Yep. Yep.
so before we get into it, do you want
Yep.
to share your history with this band at all, or do you want me to go first?
Yeah, I'll start, I guess. It's kind of funny when I was jotting down some notes, I almost kind of lumped Coldplay into um Coldplay is one of my favorite bands. They're just one of my favorite bands.
Hmm.
U2 and Coldplay have kind of always been, I mean, obviously I've liked U2 longer just because they've been a band longer,
Yeah.
but Coldplay's been a band for a long time. And I think back to, I mean, I've been a Coldplay fan since they formed as a band, and I kind of lump them into the same, almost the same category as Death Cab for Cutie in the sense that even though the music is completely different, well, maybe not completely, but quite different.
The early
Uh,
stuff, especially.
what's that?
The early stuff especially, I think. I hear
Yeah,
a lot of Death Cab in.
yeah, definitely, yeah, especially with the lyrics. Um, they both kind of have like a personal meaning. And I
Mhm.
remember when we did the transatlanticism discussion when we're talking about Death Cab, transatlanticism is always going to be this album that for me has this like almost like it's this elevated place that's on a pedestal. It has so much deep personal meaning. Coldplay kind of is the same for me. Um, I remember I was actually, let me see. So Parachutes, which is Coldplay's first album, first studio release, right? Um, Major release. Was that in when was it, 99, right? Or did it come out in 2000? I have my date
2000.
up. It came out in 2000. Wasn't it it was partially, I guess, recorded in 99. Okay, so it was
Yeah.
released July 10th, 2000. So I was just coming off at that point of being in a band. Because I was in a band, I was in several bands in the 90s, more for
Right.
fun than anything else. I played drums. When I was in high school, I was in bands and it was fun. And then when I was out of high school, I was in a band that was fun for a while, and then all of a sudden wasn't fun, because of just how much work it was to be
Mhm.
in a band and
Yep.
how it was like you had to give everything and there wasn't a lot of return for that.
Right.
So I remember when Coldplay first became sort of like when people became aware of Coldplay, and I remember listening to Parachutes, thinking to myself, "Wow, here's another great British band." Because I love so many of my favorite bands are British, Irish,
Hmm.
and they were so unassuming, so unpretentious, so down to earth, and so good. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if they can do it, it kind of like almost made it okay again to kind of pursue being in a band or pursuing music. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we were so just everybody, uh, Coldplay, especially in that first album. When you look at the photograph, the Parachutes liner photograph, it's like that's just four normal British guys who for whatever reason, got together and decided to make some music, and it worked out really well.
Absolutely. And the relationship is there too, because mind
Yeah.
you, in the 20 plus years that Coldplay's existed, they've never had a member change. Nobody's
Nope.
ever left the group. They haven't
Nope.
split up and gotten back together. To this day, it's the same four guys.
Yes. Yes. And obviously, without knowing, obviously, we don't know what happens sort of behind closed doors. But I can't recall or think of any sort of drama or issues or anything that sort of forced Coldplay to, postpone a tour because somebody was being, a diva or something like that. They've kind of rejected all of that through the course of their career and have been like, you know what, we're a rock band. We show up, we
Yep.
play, we have a good time. That's what we do. And I really appreciate that about them.
Yeah.
Um,
You
so
know, and
yeah, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, and and Chris Martin has said before in interviews that basically all that you just said is true. You
Mm,
know, when you work with a group of people, for people for 20 years and spend so much time together, you fight just like every other, you know,
yeah,
relationship.
sure.
But they just keep pushing through it and keep making music.
Making music, right? Um, so I remember, I remember the first sort of experience with Coldplay with Parachutes. I remember falling in love with the record, buying the CD, playing it constantly, playing it over and over and over again. Especially songs like Trouble. It's one of my favorite tracks
Mm.
off of Parachutes. And we can double back to Parachutes. But what I really wanted to mention was that when A Rush of Blood to the Head came out in 2002, um, it was shortly after that I started working in a music store. And I worked at this music store for about 4 years, but I started shortly after Rush of Blood came out. So like that was one of the albums that was like I was listening to a lot when I started working at this music store. And at the same time, if so many of the songs on A Rush of Blood to the Head are about, like many of Coldplay's songs, they're about deep personal experience. They're about love. They're
Mhm.
about relationships. They're about absence, missing somebody. Again, there's some similarities here with Death Cab, but I was just starting this relationship with someone that also worked at the music store, and we sort of, I think that A Rush of Blood to the Head was one of those things, this sort of catalyst that sort of helped us come together in a relationship. The relationship
Right.
didn't last that long. It was nice while it lasted, but like that album for me just kind of coincided with that period. Um, so that album has some deep personal meaning too.
Yeah.
So I can never, and I love the album. I adore the album. I can't tell you how many times I've opened the liner up to that album. There's just that simple black and white photograph of the four members in like a London studio, very like low key London studio. I'm sure you can picture the photo,
Yep.
and just like Chris at the piano, you know, the Will's at this small little drum kit. They're just, and it's, I don't know. I used to sit there and stare at that photo and be like, these are just normal people, but they're making extraordinary music. There was nothing
Yeah.
grandiose about them whatsoever. And
Yeah.
I that to me, it just resonated with me, and I don't know how else to explain it. Never felt that way about Death Cab. I always felt like Death Cab was very sort of like very cultured, very yeah, very sort of like if I'm not mistaken, Ben has like an eclectic music knowledge and is like they understand music and they take it very seriously. Not that
Yeah.
Coldplay isn't, but like they don't come across that way.
No, you're right about that. And I've both heard Ben Gibbard and Chris Martin talk about music, and Chris
Hmm.
Martin just likes what he likes, and
Hmm.
he's unapologetic about it. And I love it when Ben Gibbard posts what he's listening to on Instagram because it's
Yeah.
always very interesting, and he listens to a lot of things that I wouldn't expect.
Hmm.
And interesting things that have popped out to me is he's listened to a lot of classics and things that I wouldn't expect. Some things that I do, like I saw that him post his copy of the vinyl of, The Cure's fourth album, Pornography, which is a great record, and
Yeah.
not surprised that he listened to it. And then also, like, he was listening to The Shags' Philosophy of the World, and I was like, that's it. I didn't picture him listening to that, but at the same time, it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Um,
does. I don't know. I remember, not to get again. Well, we always go a little off topic on generation
that's
gap,
okay.
but I remember watching an interview with Ben. Gibbard, and I think it was when they were doing Plans. I think when it was when recording Plans, and they had a studio space, and he said that every single day, Monday through Friday, he would wake up, get ready, make coffee, pack a lunch, and go to his studio space and sit at work and write music because that's what he was. He was a professional musician. That's what he did.
Yeah.
And he goes, 4.5 days out of the week, like it would just be me by myself sometimes writing music. I would take a lunch break, I would go for a walk, and at the end of the day, I would have nothing to show for it. And that was fine because that's part of being a professional musician. And I was like, wow, never thought of it that way. Now, I don't know if Chris Martin does that, but I don't picture Coldplay operating the same way. You know what I mean?
He doesn't. I can say that for
No.
a fact that he
Yeah.
doesn't. I know I've seen him say a couple times that it really just he just kind of sits around
Yep.
and lives his life,
Yep.
and he always gets woken up between 11 p.m. and 4 o'clock in the morning with a song idea and goes
Mhm.
downstairs and writes it.
And
He
writes
just
it.
keeps waiting for that to happen, and then he
Right.
just shows it to Coldplay.
Yeah. Right. And he's primarily their lead writer, right? I mean, he does
He's the only
most,
one that
the
writes.
only one that writes, right? Yeah. Yeah. Which is really interesting too, because that just again really sort of puts right to the forefront how much music has come out of this one person. Like he's gifted with music. He's a gifted
Yeah,
drummer. Yeah, yeah,
and, and even the stuff that's coming out now, I mean, definitely isn't nearly as good as his earlier stuff, but he's still there's still music coming out of him, and,
yeah,
even though it's not as good, the music still does chart well, so it clearly,
yeah.
resonates with people.
Let's talk about the first two albums. Let's talk about some of the first. So my favorite Coldplay albums are without a doubt their first four albums. There's a
Yeah,
certain cohesiveness. There's a certain sort of linear progression that happens from Parachutes to A Rush of Blood to X and Y and then to Viva, and then it kind of takes a relatively sharp left turn.
yeah.
There's and there's a curve coming when it comes from when you go from X and Y to Viva La Vida. There is definitely a curve because the music is different. It
They are
Viva had
trying to
a,
push themselves, yeah,
yeah, oh for sure, and it
and it
had
works in Viva.
it what
It works, they're experimenting and trying new things, does work very well in Viva, but
yes, it really does. It really does. But you can tell that the curve is coming. But I still consider those first four albums sort of like their quintessential albums. And like I said, there is kind
yeah,
of a linear progression. We were talking just before we started recording this podcast, like Parachutes, it's kind of an interesting record. It's not a rock record. It's not a rock record. It's not a
yeah.
blues record by any means. What I'm not really sure what to call it. In fact, it's kind of hard to quantify Coldplay's early music because it's just very Coldplay.
No, it is. And I do think Parachutes is some of the best work that they've done and some of Chris's best songwriting. And
Yeah,
not to go off on a tangent too
yeah,
much, but Yellow is an incredibly important song to me.
it really is.
And the reason why that is
Yeah,
it, and this ties back into my relationship with Coldplay.
yeah,
It's weird for me to think that you've been listening to Coldplay not that much longer than I have. Like
right.
one of my earliest memories was um, I think I was like 3 or 4 years old and I heard Yellow in the back of my mom's station wagon, and that's what got me hooked on music.
On music.
It
Yeah.
was that song, and I was like, "Oh, I like this thing called music, and I wanna know more about it." And that had to be, like, maybe '05, '06,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it was because of that song that I even as, like, a little kid, I was interested in Coldplay's catalog, and
Mm,
they really are the first band that I fell in love with and
mhm,
were my introduction into the world of music.
yeah. Yeah.
And
Wow, it's a great introduction too. I mean, it's such a great band it's such a great band to get somebody into music.
yeah, and everything I've done post that is a big part of Coldplay. My love for music, the reason why I
Mhm,
wanted to pick up the guitar,
mhm,
and learn to play. Because when I was 7 or 8, I wanted to be Chris Martin when I grew up, you know what I mean? Like,
mhm,
it was that kinda thing. I mean, I don't
mhm.
now.
No, but I think it's okay if you do. I think we all kind of go through that at least maybe once a week. Just be like, you know what? It might be okay.
I mean, to live
Yeah,
the life of Chris Martin would be very interesting,
it
but,
would be. Yep.
I think I like being myself.
Yeah.
Um, uh But yeah, that's my whole thing with parachutes, and obviously I've heard Yellow more times than I could even count, probably more than any other song.
Right.
And on top of that, the more I've aged, the more I realize how beautiful these songs are and how
Mhm.
deep they really are. Because
Mhm.
even though I was into their music when I was 6 or 7 or 8, like I didn't really get what it was about until
Mhm.
probably 5 or so years ago.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It can take some time to get into sort of like to go under the surface with music and sort of understand where it's coming from. Um, yeah,
Well,
parachute.
it's I think it's more just like when you're that young, you don't have the
You
emotional
don't get it.
experience to
Sure.
get these kinds of songs.
Right. Well, yeah, that's totally valid. I remember telling somebody recently. Um, I don't remember who it was, but somebody posted something about Pink Floyd, and I just responded back. Uh, and this person was roughly your age, maybe a little bit older. And I was like, well, if you think Dark Side of the Moon has meaning now, wait another 10 years and then listen to it and it's going to hit a lot different. And then like it's funny because like my brother's wife's father, so his father-in-law, who's a huge Pink Floyd fan, only a few days after that, my brother was like mentioning, I told my brother the story and he was like, "Oh, my father-in-law always tells that to me. He's like, wait till you hit 60. Dark side hits pretty different when you're 60." And it's like, yeah, I'm sure it does. So
Yeah,
again, for every generation, for every decade that older that we get, the music that we love, it's different all of a sudden. Like we listen
yeah,
to it, we hear it differently, right? Because we have all those experiences that we didn't have 10 years ago or 5 years ago.
yeah. I agree, and that's not to go off too off topic, but
Yeah.
that's why I do think Dark Side of the Moon is one of the best albums ever made, and is one of those records that is close to being humanly perfect as
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah. We're gonna have to figure out a way to do a generation gap about it. I'm not really sure how to even go about it. It's one of those albums where it's everyone's already said almost everything you can say about it, but I still would love to talk about it.
I have a few
Um,
ideas about that. We'll
okay,
talk about that off air because
we'll have to do
I
that.
don't
Yeah,
think our listeners need to hear us, plan things out.
planning an episode now.
Yeah,
So, um, when Coldplay, so if we're still going down the discography to some degree here, so
yeah,
Rush of Blood to the Head. I think if I had to pick a favorite, I mean, I definitely have listened to Rush of Blood more than any other Coldplay album. When we decided to record this podcast last week and this week and even today, earlier today, I've been listening to pretty much all Coldplay for like the last week and a half,
yep,
and I started at the beginning. I listened to Parachutes beginning to end, listened to A Rush of Blood beginning to end, just went through the catalog. I know
hmm
every lyric to every song in like the first four albums, I think.
yeah,
I really think that I do. Like definitely every lyric to every song on Parachutes. Definitely every lyric to every song on Rush of Blood.
absolutely.
You know, it's like, and I can just sit there and sing every song because I just know the song so well. Maybe not Viva, but maybe. Um, I think that like a lot of musicians and a lot of bands, Coldplay put out a really strong first album. Parachutes is beautiful, it's melodic, it's gorgeous, it's
Yeah,
underrated. And then it was the sort of like momentum that they needed. And it was like the validity that they needed from record labels, their peers, other musicians, whoever else was sort of out there in their world to be like, okay, this is a serious band making really good music. Let's give them the space and the time that they need to really record an album. And I feel like that's what happens when you have like a rush of so that's what happens when you get an album like Rush of Blood. It's it's sort of like the next step. But they only were able to take that next step, I think, because they had made a really good album before it.
absolutely.
Yeah. Eh,
And Chris knew that because there's a great Coldplay documentary that
yeah.
they put out called A Head
Yep.
Full of Dreams. It's
Yep.
worth watching it if any of
No, I
you
saw it a
or
long time ago. Yeah.
any of our listeners haven't seen it, it's definitely worth a watch.
Right.
And there's a lot of footage in it from them recording A Rush of Blood to the Head, and Chris had the self awareness to know that if Coldplay is going to continue down the road successfully, he needs to top Parachutes, and he worked tirelessly to make this album fantastic. Not so much writing, but just like the perfectionist, the right arrangements for everything,
Yeah.
making sure that all the lyrics were correct, And
Yeah,
yeah,
it's incredible. It's an incredible album, and my favorite thing about A Rush of Blood to the Head is what's not there. That's my favorite thing about that album. You can listen to every single track, and the music is so minimalist. It's everything that needs to be there is there, and nothing else.
yeah,
Nothing is overplayed on that album. Like there, no instruments are overplayed. Nothing is like ridiculously overdubbed or cleaned up or highly polished. It's a pretty raw record.
mm,
Um, and just it's so melodic, and so it's almost like it's like the Tao of like writing songs. It's like,
yeah.
what's that old saying? Like, the master doesn't try, the master does,
That's right.
right? And that's kind of what you have here. It's just like everything that we need to put in this album is there. Nothing that we don't is not going in. It's not in the songs, and you can listen to that album from beginning to end, and it's just a perfect example of minimalistic rock music done right.
Absolutely. And the tracks show it. There's some seriously beautiful tracks. And I know that the first half is very radio hit friendly, but the second half is just as strong. I mean,
Yep.
The Scientist obviously is a beautiful song, but then there's, Green Eyes and Warning Sign and
Yep.
Amsterdam, which is my favorite off the
Amsterdam is
record.
Amsterdam is haunting. It's so hauntingly beautiful. I think it
It
might be my favorite too. Yeah.
Yeah, it is completely haunting. And I've never ranked like Coldplay tracks in terms of my favorite,
No, I never really have either.
but Amsterdam would definitely be in the running.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful song. For me, I also, as many people do, love The Scientist. It is just such a, I don't even know how to describe it into words, really. Now, again, from someone who played drums for years, like when you listen to The Scientist, the drum track, Will's drum track on The Scientist is, again, it's an exercise in like beautifully spaced and beautiful timing, and nothing isn't there. I mean, when you listen to it again as a drummer, like you say, okay, well, he's going to hit a crash cymbal or he's going to like do a little fill or something. Nope. It's just not there. It's just so low key, so minimalistic. The lyrics are
Some of Chris's best.
some of Chris's best, and um, as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, so when that shortly after that record came out, like probably about a year after it came out, I was in this relationship, and I can remember listening to The Scientist over and over again, both with
Mm,
and without this person on my own, like sitting in my car at night thinking, yeah, we can't go back to the start, can we? And it became
no.
pretty evident quite quickly that in real life you kind of can't go back to the start. And that's actually, it's kind of how we when we decided to stop seeing each other, it was like, this isn't The Scientist. We can't do this anymore. And we're like, we can't. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
that's the power of that song. And I'm sure there are other people that are like, oh, that happened to me too. So
No, I completely agree with you. And one of the most amazing, live concert experiences I've ever had was when I saw Coldplay. I saw him Boston 2016 on the Head Full of Dreams tour, and that song was so unbelievable to be seen live, and
yeah,
especially in the end when the song ended, Chris just played the chorus again and just let us sing it,
yeah,
and it was one of the most incredible things I've
chilling. Yeah,
seen and been a
yeah.
part of.
Yeah, it's such a pretty record. It's such a great record. Every song is so meaningful. Every lyric, again, this exercise in minimalism is such a beautiful album. It's one of my favorite albums of all time.
Yeah.
So X and Y, I also equally, it's almost right up there with me because
Mm.
again, it's beautiful, but it's so much edgier.
Yeah.
And like this, I feel like this is Coldplay's real rock record, X and Y.
An interesting fact I'd like to throw out is that this is actually Chris Martin's least favorite Coldplay record.
Is it really? Okay.
Yeah, he feels that it was unfinished,
Yeah, I read that
and
he felt
some
it
of the
was
tracks
rushed,
are
right?
underbaked,
Yeah.
and that it just wasn't cohesive.
I don't, okay. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's his
I mean,
music. I feel it. I feel like it is to some degree. Um,
yeah, and you can disagree with that too, because everybody
sure.
interprets music different. And I've often found that artists themselves are the harshest critic of their own work.
Right.
Um, so I mean, Chris didn't make a bad. Coldplay didn't make a bad album here for X and Y. X and Y is genuinely a solid record.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, I do think Chris is right. I do think it is a little too long. That's my really only big critique of it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess when I stop and think about like there is sort of a when you listen to a track like like White Shadows, which is a pretty hard-hitting rock song.
Yeah,
Um it doesn't really mesh with a song like The Hardest Part, which is more of a ballady type of song, right?
yeah,
So I guess I can see that um to some degree. Yeah, I could see what he's saying.
yeah. My personal favorite off this record is "Swallowed in the Sea."
Great, great song. Yeah.
That for some reason just excuse me, I don't even know what it is about it. Just it just holds some kind of significance for me. Um, I
Hmm.
actually have a painting on my wall uh, that my aunt gifted to me a while ago, and it was this artist that like paints song lyrics, and she did "Swallowed in the Sea."
Hmm.
Um, just so you have a better idea, I can just kind of
Oh yeah,
walk you over.
that's
I don't know if you can see
fantastic.
that too well.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah. So because I have that hanging up, that really made me think about the song, and then it took on a whole nother kind of significance.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, my sister-in-law is a huge Coldplay fan. This is her favorite. She loves X and Y. It's her favorite album. She listens to it constantly. Here's a cool story about X and Y. And you and I are music buffs. We love music. We know people who are equally, into music.
yeah,
You never can be. Music is one of those things where just when you start to think you know some stuff about music, you meet someone who blows you out of the water. Like blows you
yeah,
out of the water.
absolutely.
Like I have a couple friends who I have this good friend who I actually have invited onto the podcast, and like once in a while I'll talk about music, and he'll just be like, "Oh, you're talking about something such record. It was released that was released on November 7th, 1986, and they recorded that." And I mean, he's like a walking encyclopedia of music, and I'm jealous of that fact. But I remember about probably 3 or 4 years ago, I was over at my brother's house, and my brother is he's an audiophile, huge music buff.
Yep.
Um, and he got on this Kraftwerk kick
Yes.
and loves Kraftwerk. And I was never really into them. Like I knew of them, but I couldn't name one song. So he was like playing Trans Europe Express.
That's a good album.
It's
Yeah.
a good album. It's a good
I'm not
Kraftwerk.
super familiar with Kraftwerk, but I've listened to a few of their albums. I know the big stuff. I'm not a Kraftwerk expert by any means, but
By any
yeah,
means. So like he's playing that, and I was like, okay, it does, and it kind of wears it. Like you're like, it's cool for the first 10 minutes, then it's like, and then you sort of like, okay, I need like some type of tempo change here. But right, right, something's got to change with music. So
yeah, that's usually how it goes when I listen to Kraftwerk. Yeah,
he
not
popped.
not to, not to diminish their importance though.
No, because they really are the pioneers of electronic sampled music. I mean, they're kind of the first.
Yeah,
And so he pops in their album Computer World. I think that's the name of the album. I think it is. And he's playing it. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of the same thing again. Okay, whatever. And like a couple more songs go, and then Computer Love comes on,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and it's the intro, um, which Coldplay used. They with permission they used the intro that they sampled Kraftwerk
yeah,
in their song Talk, and it was like this moment of like crazy revelation, like how did I not know that? And then no one knew it, like, so then I'm like, that's Coldplay sampled that, they used that in one of their
yeah.
songs. My brother's like, no they didn't. I'm like, they did.
They
And my
did.
my sister-in-law is like, I think they did. How did I not know that? So like we had to pop that out and pop in X and Y, and I'm like, just go to track 5 and play it. And it's like it's this moment of like, how did I not know that? Which is the coolest thing. but I didn't
They
know it.
sampled Kraftwerk on another spot in this record too.
Really?
Yes, just,
Okay.
I'm looking it up right now. I'm trying to figure out which one it
And
is.
yeah, it's
I
so
think it's the very beginning of Square One.
okay. I could
That
see that.
kind of,
Yeah.
whatever that's I don't know. I think there's some kind of, Square One Coldplay sample,
Okay.
with Kraftwerk. I'm not
Yeah.
positive though. I'm,
Yeah.
like, looking it up as we talk right now.
This is
Um,
obviously their sample for on Talk is a guitar riff of Kraftwerk's keyboard original
yeah.
music, and it's just so cool that they would sample that. I don't know, it's just the coolest thing. But again, if you'd asked me that, I would have been like, no, there's no way Coldplay sampled, and that they did. So it's just one of those things that you discover completely inadvertently, and it was the coolest thing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I remember I had that similar experience when I was listening to a Kraftwerk record and I
Mhm.
heard that and I was like, "Oh, that's
Yep,
Coldplay."
that's so cool.
Um,
Um, I also love to kind of finish up X and Y to some degree. Obviously, "Fix You" became like the huge single off of X and Y. I
yeah.
don't know. It's not my favorite Coldplay song. It's a great song. It kind of unfortunately suffers from that. Um,
I think it's overplayed.
it's overplayed, so it kind of suffers from that almost like quoted. Almost it almost has become a meme to some degree.
Yeah.
Sadly, um, it's a great song. Not my favorite.
That
Uh,
music video is weird too. Just the way he just
it is weird.
motions his mouth,
Yeah.
when he's singing.
Yes.
Um,
It is a weird music video. Um,
Not as weird as Talk though. That video is just like
I can't quite
they
put.
start it's like an old school space movie and I guess they fight some kind of robot or something. It's just
I guess I didn't
it's
know.
totally weird.
I haven't seen that. I know I've seen the video for "Fix You." I think one of my favorite songs is "Low" off the album. I think that's probably
Really?
my favorite. Yeah, I love that song. "Low" and "White Shadows" because "White Shadows" is one of Coldplay's like hardest hitting songs.
Yeah.
It hits hard. It's a
A
great song.
Message is another big one for me too that I like
Message is good.
quite a
Yep.
bit.
Yep.
Until Kingdom Come is
Yeah.
completely beautiful.
Yeah. I've also talked with friends of mine who play drums, and again, Will Champion on this record, awesome, just awesome drummer. Definitely not as minimalistic as he was on A Rush of Blood, and his drums, they sound. It's like a really nice balance between like straight up rock and roll drums, but like also ever so slightly, sort of a little bit processed, kind of
Yeah.
dark, kind of trashy. I love how his cymbals are super trashy in the whole album, like almost like he's playing through like a, I don't know. It's like I'm sure he was using really good equipment and just making it sound bad, but in like the in a good way. You know what I mean?
Artistic way. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's
He's actually a really underrated drummer, and I think that
he's an amazing drummer. Yeah,
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 even in the newer stuff, I mean, his drumming is still interesting and,
yeah,
when I see him because when you listen to the live stuff, it's not as processed, if you listen to the live recordings of their newer stuff, it's not as processed live, and the actual,
yeah.
them playing as a band in those songs come across more like and we'll get to it later, like a song like Paradise, when you hear it live,
It sounds
it
better
sounds completely different than it does
on the
on the
album.
album. I mean, it's still the same song, but it's not processed, and it is like, "Oh, okay, I like this version better than the album."
Yeah, I love Will Champion. I think he's a great drummer. He seems like a cool guy too in the interviews that I've seen and stuff. I mean, he's definitely into. He's a huge fan of just music. He loves music. I kind of lost it a little bit, like like when they entered the Viva La Vida days, and like I think it was for the song. I guess it was probably for Viva. Was it Viva? Yeah, it was for Viva.
Yeah.
When he would start like standing up and like playing a timpani and a giant bell,
Yeah, yeah.
like the Liberty Bell kind of on stage. I was like, okay, they're moving in a new direction at this point. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, which I think worked. I appreciate their self-awareness to know that they couldn't keep repeating the rock sound that they did in the last 3 records. They had to try something different. And, they enlisted Brian Eno to help him, the legendary Brian Eno, to help him with
Yeah.
this record, and I do think it worked.
It did.
Viva's a solid record beginning to end, and there's not a single song in here that I skip, when I listen to it.
Hmm. Okay.
Take it you
I
have
I
a
I skip.
dissenting opinion?
I cannot. I will skip Strawberry Swing every time it comes on. I can't stand it. I'm not a fan of Strawberry Swing.
Both you and my brother can't stand that song. Like I've yeah.
And even the way it starts, that's the one that starts with like clapping or like someone's like hitting their leg, right? Is that what, like, or
Yeah.
stomping or something? Oh no, 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 no. Skip. Yep. Don't like it. Don't like it. It's a weird
It does
song.
come after Violet Hill, which is a awesome record,
Yeah.
song.
Yeah. It's an awesome song. Oh,
Yeah.
Violet Hill's awesome. Yeah.
Violet Hill's
Um,
great.
and Life in Technicolor, which is the opening track, isn't there a version with vocals? There's a version with
Yeah.
vocals. I like that one better because the one on the album doesn't have vocals, right? It's an instrumental, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's an instrumental.
I like the one with the vocal. There's one floating around out there. I think in like some type of like extended edition or like limited whatever.
It's on the,
Well,
Prospects March EP.
okay, right. I like that version better. I don't know why they didn't have vocals.
Um, I don't know that. That being said, I think Life in Technicolor works really well as an opener for
Hmm.
this record because it kind of puts you in the atmosphere of this record and lets you know this is not gonna be Coldplay's typical deal.
Right.
Um, but it's not a song that I listen to on my own, if I'm
Mm,
gonna listen to Life in Technicolor, just if I'm feeling it, I'm gonna put on Life in Technicolor, the vocals version.
right. Oh, that's right. It was called right. It was
Which
called two.
also has a weird video where they're performing as, hand puppets.
Yes, that I definitely can picture that one. They've made
Um,
some weird videos.
I mean, it's so weird and it's not good, but at the same time, I love that video so much because it's just like,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. So I guess that would be one of the questions I would ask Chris Martin. I would probably ask him, why did you put the version without lyrics on the album? And before he could even answer me, I probably would just interrupt him and say, why didn't you just cut Strawberry Swing? Like that needed to not be there. There had to be
Also, where did the
something.
puppets come from?
What?
Also, where did the puppets come from? That's what I wanna
Where,
ask.
where did the puppets come from? Yeah.
Those are all solid questions. I actually disagree with you. I like Strawberry Swing. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
That's fine.
Is it
Yeah.
my favorite Coldplay song? No,
No.
but it's I think it's a nice light song between the heavy rockiness of Violet Hill and then emotionally heavy Death and All His Friends.
Yeah, that's right. And again, it almost ends with a very sort of, A Rush of Blood ends with Amsterdam, which is a very emotionally heavy song. Um, and this is the same situation, right? It's not
Yeah,
a it goes out on kind of a sad sort of somber note. Um, it's a good album. Again, like I mentioned at the beginning, you can kind of feel the change in this album. Parachutes, A Rush of Blood, and X and Y sound like Coldplay to me. It's like, yep, that's a Coldplay album. This album, you can still tell it's Coldplay, but you can sort of feel that wind of change in the music, in the arrangement, in the instrumentals. It's different.
yeah, it is different, but I
Different.
I will always admire them for trying something different on this record and
Yeah.
trying to push their sound. On a side note, I don't know if you've ever heard it, but have you heard the solo piano version of Lost?
Yes, it's
I
beautiful.
I love that so much.
Yes, absolutely gorgeous. Lost is a beautiful song too. Again, it's one of those songs where you just sing along, whether you doesn't matter if anybody's around, doesn't matter where you are, you're just going to sing along because it's a
Yeah,
beautiful song. Yeah.
it really is.
So
Um,
they take a little bit of a hiatus of like releasing music. They don't release Milo Xyloto until 2011.
yeah,
And that's when for me they it's almost like they come back as a different band. Um, so
yeah.
right? They come back as kind of a different band. Now,
Yeah, I think that this is because people always talk about, do you like new Coldplay versus old Coldplay,
right,
stuff like that, and I think
right.
that Milo Xyloto is the point where new Coldplay begins.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Now, do you know if that was a conscious effort on their part? Did they go away? Did they do a tour and then go away and take a break and then say, okay, we have to kind of reinvent our sound here, or no?
well, they worked with Brian Eno again on this record, and they wanted to
Yeah.
push things further to see what they could do.
Yeah.
And this is where things started getting wonky because it's supposed to be a loose concept album about
Mm.
some kind of I don't really know the story too well, but some kind of dystopian, future
Mhm.
where music is banned, I guess, or something
Mhm.
like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there's some kind of love story entwined in this. I don't know. It's just weird. They started wearing the paint clothes. Um,
Yeah, we've talked about the paint clothes. Yeah, they started wearing the paint clothes. I can't
um,
figure it out.
yeah, and this is where things started getting weird because Chris Martin
Yeah.
was talking about, oh, we're supposed to be space mechanics or you know
Okay. Yep.
I don't know what that means, but I have very mixed feelings about Milo Xyloto because
Yeah.
and I've heard this album a lot,
Yeah.
because there was a period of time where I had moved when I was maybe we moved into the house that I'm living in now around
Mhm.
2012.
Okay.
So this was the latest Coldplay record, and Coldplay was the
Yeah.
only band I knew at that time, right? So when we moved in, I had nothing but my mattress on the floor. All of my other stuff was in boxes, and the only thing I had unpacked was
Yep.
my CD player, and I had the first five Coldplay records, and that
Okay.
was it. And that's all I had to entertain myself for a week. So
Yeah.
I have listened to this album quite a few times.
Yeah.
And my only big beef with it is that it's overproduced.
Overproduced.
It's too
Yeah.
yeah, it's too glossy, and
Very glossy.
these songs really come through in the live album they did, Live 2012, which is
Mhm.
really good, and I would definitely recommend checking out. But that being said, some of my favorite Coldplay songs are on this record, especially "Us Against the World."
Mhm.
Might take the cake as my favorite Coldplay song.
Mhm.
Um, and "Up with the Birds" is really gorgeous, as well.
Mhm.
But those are my thoughts. I don't know, the Rihanna collaboration,
Mhm.
not my deal.
Mhm. Mhm.
Major Minus is just weird. Every Teardrop is a Waterfall is just a nice pop song. I do like that
Yeah.
song.
Yeah.
Um,
I
Charlie
feel like
Brown's,
I feel like
More Alive.
there's a more of a mainstream appeal to a lot of these songs. So it's like it's easier to listen to in the sense that it doesn't so much of Coldplay's early music grabs you,
Yeah,
um, to the point where you're like you have to sit and listen and feel something. You have if you listen to The Scientist or Yellow or Trouble or any of these songs, like you're going to sit and it's going to make you feel something. And there's going to be an emotional response to some degree to their early music.
right.
Um, Whereas some of their later music, I don't ever particularly have an emotional response. Now, it could just be me because it doesn't coincide with a specific time in my life, or it just could be that the music is somewhat more mainstream. It's a little bit more sort of watered down, less flavorful, sort of everyday music.
It's a little bit of both,
Yeah.
honestly, for me, because like Coldplay's later stuff does not emotionally affect me as much as their earlier stuff. But that
Right.
being said, there's usually one or two songs on an album that really will grip me emotionally, on the newer stuff too.
Hmm.
And for Milo Xyloto, that's "Us Against the World" and "Up with the Birds,"
Hmm.
which were not singles or anything like that. "Up with the Birds" wasn't even played live. But I feel like that the emotions in those songs come through really well.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. It just doesn't. I don't connect with the music as much as I do with some of their other music. And I also don't know that the lyrics are to the same level. Um, that's just me. That's my interpretation. I don't know. So
No, you are right about it.
yeah,
I completely agree with you.
yeah.
But
Um, go ahead.
no, I do enjoy this album beginning to end, and I do listen to it, front to back once every couple of months, and I think that and this comes into effect. Well, this comes into explain why I had some connections with Coldplay's later work is because of the nostalgia factor.
Yeah.
Do you get what I'm saying? Like, I remember laying on my mattress in my bare
Right.
bedroom and listening to this record,
Yeah. Right. So
and,
there's a meaning there. Sure.
when I listen to it, is even though it's maybe not as emotionally gripping as their earlier stuff,
Hmm.
it does take me back there, and I do appreciate it. So when I do listen to this album, it is more of a nostalgia trip, but at the same time, like, the songs aren't offensive or horrendous
No,
or,
no, they're not bad
they're
songs.
better than most pop music that was coming out at that time.
Oh, hands down. Definitely. Definitely.
Because I would rather listen to Parachutes than, like, not Parachutes, Paradise
Yeah.
over, like, We Found Love in a Hopeless Place by Rihanna, you know?
Yes. Definitely. Definitely. Yeah, I've tried really hard. Like as a Coldplay fan, as someone who really appreciates their music, appreciates their approach to music, appreciates the fact that um, I still think that for the most part, I mean, they've enjoyed outrageous success, well deserved success. They've made ridiculous amounts of money, and they've gone on to tour and play with some of the world's biggest bands, um, which again is kind of interesting when you stop and think
Yeah.
about. I think about this from time to time. You take a band like U2. I always come back to U2. They had to prove themselves for a long time. You know what I mean? Throughout
Yeah.
the entire decade of the '80s, they kind of had to prove themselves as like a real rock band, like a real band.
Yeah.
And I don't think that other famous musicians in those days were taking Bono's phone call. They were like, who is I don't know who this person is," and they would hang up. And like I feel like a band like Coldplay, who one day isn't on the scene, and then a few days later, and I'm obviously exaggerating, they come out with a couple of really great records. All of a sudden, they are playing like major rock shows, big arenas, playing with major acts, and they've had incredible success. They're really great. They're just a really great band. I'm
Yeah.
I'm always going to wonder if when you and this can be applied to music, it could be applied to if you're a painter, it could be I do a lot of photography. I feel like whenever you're trying to make that carve that niche for yourself, right? You try so much harder to make sure it's done 110%. Yeah, right? And then
Yeah.
if you are lucky and gifted and blessed enough to achieve any level of success, let alone like cataclysmic success like Coldplay, maybe you don't need to try quite as hard anymore.
That's
I don't know.
fair.
I always wonder that about every single music, and I know that that's somewhat negative, but like I've wondered that about you too. You and I were talking recently about you too. The band, uh, their later few albums, like they did Songs of Experience or Songs of Innocence and then Songs of Experience, right? Is that yeah? Songs of
Yeah.
Innocence, which I kind of like, and then Songs of Experience, which there's
There's
like
1
one
or
good
2 good tracks, but other than
one or
that, yeah.
And it's like you take a band like U2, who have been one of the most successful rock groups in the history of music. Um, are they trying to make? Are they were they trying to make really good records, or did they just set out to make a record? And they're like, you know what? If it's a B plus, we're okay with that. I don't
My
know.
theory about that is that they haven't realized yet that they can tour without having an album to support.
That's a good point too. Like that, right? That's the old mentality of like if you're gonna do a tour, you have to release a new album to tour. It's like, well, yeah, but you guys got 8 other albums that are awesome. Play those songs.
Yeah.
It's what everybody wants to hear anyway. I mean, they did do a Joshua Tree tour, or like 30th
But
anniversary.
still, there was an album and a purpose to that tour. They're
There
not
was,
touring just to tour, and I think that U2
yeah,
would benefit at this point in their career, which I hope
yeah,
Coldplay does soon, where they
yeah,
just say, "We've made enough albums.
yeah,
We're just gonna set out on the road and tour and maybe play some deep cuts and play some hits and just
yeah,
have a good time. We're just gonna,
yeah.
just tour our entire catalog because there's some great back catalog stuff."
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely get behind that. So to kind of wrap up with Coldplay, like I can listen to some of the stuff on Milo. Ghost Stories, you're a huge fan. I listened to it again today, and it's good. I like it. It's a nice low key album again. There's some great melodies in the record. Um, Nothing really grabbed me particularly as like, wow, that's a brilliant song. But It's good.
Mhm. Um,
Um,
so if you don't mind, I wanna talk about Ghost Stories just,
yeah,
quickly because this album is very important to me.
yeah.
Uh, this album, my love for it is because I do think that genuinely, Chris Martin wrote a really great breakup record because this album
Mhm.
is about his divorce from Gwyneth Paltrow.
Yeah, yeah.
And at the same time, this is probably out of all their albums the biggest that has the biggest nostalgia factor because
Mhm,
this was the first album that I was aware that albums were released and that there was like a hype up and a build up to it, and then you went to the store
mhm.
and you bought it the day it came out. And
Yeah,
this was the first album for me. This was like the first,
no
you know,
kidding.
this was the second album I ever bought. The first album I ever bought was Coldplay's Live 2012, and then
No kidding.
this was the first album where it was all like, "Oh my god, they just announced a new album. I'm gonna listen to the singles," and I'm waiting and waiting and waiting today, for the release day to go to the store and buy it. And there's all that memory with that record.
Yeah,
And I listened. This album came out in May of 2014, and I listened to
right.
this album nonstop that summer.
Yeah,
Um, because I wasn't into any other bands. Like I didn't know anything
right.
else. I
Right,
was
right, right. Yeah.
so not knowing other music outside of this was like, "Oh my god, this is incredible." And, to this day, I still enjoy this record a lot, and it's my favorite Coldplay record
Mm,
because of all of that, nostalgia thing and the thing that went along with it, and the fact that I
mhm,
think that this genuinely is the best album they've done, post
mm,
2010,
mhm,
and it is my favorite out of all of them.
mhm. Yeah. No, that's cool. Everybody has such a interesting, different personal connection to music, and that's one of the things that make records and songs so varied. Is just because you don't connect to it, or just because I don't connect to something, doesn't mean you won't. Um,
Right.
it's just really interesting. It's interesting. So I didn't realize that was your second album purchase. Wow, wow,
Yeah, I remember it was
pretty
funny
cool.
because I remember, I was in school when it came out, and I heard my mom was gonna go to Target that day, and I was like, "If I give you money, will you buy Ghost Stories for me?"
Yeah,
And, I remember coming home from school that day and seeing it on my bed and being super excited,
that's
especially because she
awesome.
bought the right copy, the Target deluxe version with 3 extra tracks, and I was like,
Yes,
"But can I skip swim lessons tonight? Because I really wanna listen to this album."
I'm gonna play
Um,
this on repeat. Yeah,
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 so
that's awesome.
yeah,
I don't know that I
uh
remember my second album. I wish I could remember. I know my first CD I ever bought was Octung Baby by U2, but I
that's a
don't
great
know.
first album to buy.
That was my first CD, and like I had a bag. Same thing. It was like Mom, you have to take me to the up to the record store to buy this. I have to buy this. And she's like, well, we
Yeah.
can go tomorrow. I'm like, oh no, oh no, we're not
Oh,
going
no, no,
tomorrow.
no, I have to get it the
So
day it comes out.
day it comes out, and then she was like, okay. So like I remember she dropped me off, waited for me. I had to go in. I can still remember it. This is a long time ago.
Yep.
Still remember going in, paying for it, and bought the CD. Um, and then getting yelled at because I didn't buy the cassette because the cassette was like $6.99
Yeah.
and the CD was like $23 because CDs were really expensive back then. And I was like, yeah, but who is going to buy? Like, come on, mom, it's 1991. What are we doing here? I'm buying the CD,
Yeah, exactly.
right? And I can't believe you wasted that much money on a CD. I'm like, no, you don't understand. It's YouTube. Um,
Yeah.
I can't tell you my second one though. I really can't. I have no idea. Wish I
Well,
knew.
I just remember because there was the whole build up to this that,
Yeah, yeah,
Live 2012 didn't really have. Um, so that was really cool. And
yeah,
also, it came out I was in 6th grade when this album came out, and it
yeah.
came out towards the end of the year, and I remember it being like, not to get too cringy or personal, but the album I'd listen to and sulk that, like, my first crush didn't like me back or anything like that or anything stupid. So, it's a serious nostalgia trip when I listen
Yeah.
to it, and I will always love it for that, for all those different things that are attached to it.
That's really cool. That's really cool. I think that Coldplay is one of those bands too where so many people they kind of um transcend age, they transcend um a lot of different sort of like categories that we put, oh, this is an old person band or a young person band or a urban band or whatever I mean, they kind of transcend all of that. And you find people who you wouldn't expect to be Coldplay fans, and they really are.
Yeah, Tom Brady.
Because yeah, yeah, because it's just like it's great music. Um, there's an interview somewhere. I don't remember where it was, but um, Chris Martin and I think it's Hugh Grant. who's a British actor, and there he's like a big Coldplay fan, and he's like, I don't really like music. He's like, I'm not that big on music, but I like what Chris does. He's a great he's a great musician, and he's a great musician. The band is
Yeah.
great. They're a great band. I don't know. I'll always for me. So I like your sort of Baxter with Ghost Stories. For me, it's a rush of blood. It always takes me back. Whenever I put that album in and I listen to like Scientist, Clocks,
Mm.
Green Eyes, really the whole album. It's just I'm kind of right back in the car, like at night after work. Yep.
Yeah.
So I feel like if I feel like most of our listeners probably are familiar with Coldplay. If you're not, if it's a band that you're really looking to get into, but just start from the beginning, like a lot of these bands.
Yep. Start
Start
with
from the
parachutes and go
start
right
with
on through.
parachutes. Yeah, go right on through. It'd be really cool to revisit this in a year or something and kind of see if any. I don't know, like if we change our sort of interpretation of the music.
That's fair.
Mm.
And for our listeners, real quick, just so
Yeah.
nobody's disappointed. You don't have to. I'm just going to quickly gloss over my feelings very quickly on
Okay.
the three albums that have come out post Ghost Stories and how I felt about them because I am a
Uh,
Coldplay fan. Like, as much as I may diss some of these records, I have them
yeah.
on vinyl. Like, I have all of them
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're a fan. You're in it. You're in it. I can't really talk
because
much about
it's like
them.
they were the first band that introduced me to music, and they played such an important role in my love of music that I feel like I at least owe it to them to buy the new album when it comes out,
I
even
feel
if
the
it's not
same
a
way about.
favorite of mine. So
I feel the same way about you too. I did not buy songs of. I did not buy songs of experience.
you didn't.
I did not buy that album. No, 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 no. I did not buy it. I have every
Oh,
other. I have every other YouTube album. I did not.
I bought it.
Did not purchase it. Like I love you too, but I'm like, you know what? I don't think I'm buying this album. I stream it. I am guilty. I stream it.
That's no, that's totally fair.
Yep.
So when Coldplay dropped A Head Full of Dreams, I there is still a bit of a nostalgia for that one too because I was still in middle school when that album came out, and I saw him on that tour. That was my very first concert with Coldplay and the Head Full of Dreams tour, and
Mhm.
it's just like it's an okay pop record, and I thought that this was just kind of this pop detour that they were taking. Um, and I was like, this is fine for now. I don't want this to be long term, but if this is what they want to do right now, I'll get behind it. It's a okay pop record. It's a solid pop record. Like it's not horrible. It's fine.
Yeah.
Um, and then they followed that up with Everyday Life in late 2019, which I do love that record a lot. It's such a different tone for them. It's more political. It's
Hmm.
like Trouble in Town is a masterpiece. Arabesque is a masterpiece.
That is a really good song.
Um,
I do like that song. Yeah.
Yeah, I like everything on Everyday Life except for the last two songs, Champion of the World and Everyday Life, because Champion of the World, that guitar riff is so lazy, if, in my
Hmm.
opinion, that I can't listen to it. And Everyday Life just reminds me of Everybody Hurts by REM just a little too much.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so that's my only real beef with that. Everything else about it, I like though, and it is a record I do return to fairly recently. And
Hmm.
then a couple of months ago, they released Music of the Spheres, and that was a complete disaster. And I'm not joking; is one of the worst albums I've ever heard. I really dislike it. The very last song on it, Coloratura, I absolutely love. It's like a 10-minute prog piece. Which is great. I love that song, but everything else is just complete garbage. There's some really questionable collaborations with Selena Gomez and
Hmm.
BTS, and
Hmm.
there's just it's mostly interlude tracks. This whole album, there's only like one, two, three,
Yeah. It's a short.
yeah.
Yeah.
People of the Pride was supposed to be like their Coldplay trying metal, but there was some music critic that I saw that just basically said People the Pride is like if you combined like a Home Depot commercial with Ford Truck Month. Um,
Wow. I love that. That's fantastic. Yeah.
yeah, and then that follows Beautiful, which Chris Martin's vocals are pitched up to like a chipmunk, and it's horrible. It's bad.
Yeah.
But I bought it on vinyl.
Bought it on vinyl. I mean, there you go. I'm just
Yeah,
looking at the production credits now for this album. I'm looking at the production credits. I'm trying to count them. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. there's about 20 or more people listed as production and programming, additional production, mixing it. There's like how many there's like five, six, seven, there's like 10 people who were engineers on this album.
Yeah.
Like, how do you need that many humans to help you make your record?
And this is,
Hmm.
I thought Milo Xyloto was overproduced until
Yep.
I heard this, and
Yep.
I was like, oh, this isn't even human music.
Right.
Um,
Like, could you
uh,
imagine? Like, I'm just picking a name out. Like, I'm picking a name out. I'm picking out Miguel Lara is listed as engineering, and it's like, oh, did you work on the Coldplay album? And he's like, yeah, I did the first 17 seconds of track 4, and it's like, oh, okay,
cool.
you need this many people.
Yeah. Um, I really dislike Music of the Spheres. I was disappointed. I thought, when Everyday Life came out and they did A Head Full of Dreams, I was like, oh, that theory I had holds up. It was just like a pop detour. They're going to get back to making more band music. And then
Yeah,
this came out and I was like, oh, no,
yeah,
no, Chris. Everyday Life cannot be the detour.
right, right, yeah.
Yeah, it was like, ooh, no, 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 no.
Well, on like you said a few minutes ago, at least I guess in the very least, you have to, at least I have to give them credit for still making music. Um, it does. What's the word I want to use? Frustrate me. It frustrates me when you have bands that are this good who kind of go down this sort of weird experimental, super processed, computer driven music. And it's like, you know what? You guys have access to the best producers in the world. You guys are still some of the best songwriters in the world. They have unlimited resources, just like any band of their stature. It's like,
Yep.
take some time and like really, really do a job. Think of, I don't know. I maybe this is kind of where they're at right now with music, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't think
I
so.
no. And you know what though? You made a really good point there because there's in my opinion there's nothing wrong with a rock band that wants to do something that's weird and over processed and kind
Yeah.
of electronic based. Like that's totally fine. And there's examples of bands doing that incredibly well.
Yeah.
One that comes to mind is when Radiohead did Kid A, which universally is highly acclaimed as one of the best albums of the 21st century, and
Yep.
it's my favorite Radiohead record, and they do that thing really well. Coldplay does this over processed electronic based thing horribly on
Right.
Music of the Spheres, which
Right.
is why it's not good. It's not that the route that they chose to take; it's just the execution is.
It's right. It's how they deliver. Yeah.
I feel like they just kind of put this together. Like it was just like, yeah, okay, that'll do. Let's make
Yeah.
it out as quickly as possible.
Yeah, there, and unfortunately that kind of, which is weird though too, because like I can't feel that Coldplay is sort of locked into any deadlines. I can't feel like I don't believe that somebody's picking the phone up and like threatening Coldplay. Like if you don't get this album out in 2 weeks, like I feel like they work on their own time. So I don't get it. I don't get why you'd risk putting out a bad record if you don't have to. I don't know.
It could just be because maybe Chris Martin or the other members of the band genuinely like this record.
It's possible.
It
It's
could
either
be
that
that.
or they just spent too much time as mechanics in space.
Yeah. That could be it.
Once you
Oh,
spend a
also
few,
another issue I have with this record a lot is that you should never, ever, 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 ever use emojis as song titles. Bad, 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 bad.
it's horrible. That's really bad. That takes it. That is a new low for Coldplay.
No,
Yep.
no, 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 no.
No,
They had to get special permission from Spotify to do that. Like
really,
that was like they really wanted to do that, and no, it does not. No, 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 no. A times a billion.
you feel quite. This has struck a chord with you.
It really has because
Yeah,
it's so incredibly corny. Like,
it is. It's really, really. And yeah, it's something. It's something that somebody 25 years younger than them would do.
yeah, exactly. It feels like a forced dad
Very
thing.
immature.
You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just like you can't name it. You have to use an emoji. You can't be clever enough to come up with an actual word title for it.
Right. 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 Well, that is sort of. I guess on that note, yeah. What else? Yeah, they didn't.
They
Um,
did,
they
much to
did.
my chagrin.
Yeah. Nonetheless, Coldplay will always remain one of my favorites. They're still one of my favorite bands. Um, and
Yeah.
especially if I'm just one of those, if it's one of those days where I need to have a connection to music, like I'm, for whatever that reason, whatever the reason may be, um, I will put their music on. And going back last week and listening to Parachutes again from beginning to end, haven't done that in years. It was really fun. They're a great band.
Yeah. No, and I do love them to death, even though I just really harshly criticize the record of theirs. Um, they're a band that I'll always pay attention to and listen to the new records. Definitely buy it,
Yep. Yep.
because they really do hold a big significance in my love of music and the development of just me as a person. You know.
Definitely. Definitely.
Um,
All right.
all
Well,
right.
this was fun. I mean, I love talking about it. This was a deep dive. This was a very deep dive. So
Yeah.
it was really fun. I think maybe for our next episode, we'll get back to doing two different albums and kind of mix it up. And
Yeah.
that yeah, this was a good discussion though.
But
For
this would be fun to do for another artist, I think.
It would be. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do we do now, Sam? Should we take a step back in time and check out what was on the Billboard charts?
I would love to.
We got to get Billboard um, top 100. Give me a year.
1971.
Ooh, I like it.
That was a very good year for music.
It was a good year for music, wasn't it?
Yep.
All right. So top Billboard the week of December. Let's see. Perfect. Week of December 25th, 1971. Oh no, it's gonna happen again.
What's wrong?
The number one song for the week of December 25th, 1971. I'm not sure I know this song. It was Brand New Key by an artist named Melanie.
Cannot say I've ever heard that,
Don't
so I'm
know
going
that
to look
I,
this up on YouTube
yep,
quickly.
don't know that I know this song. Brand New Key by Melanie. It's got a picture of Melanie. Okay.
Brand new key.
Yeah.
All
Number
right.
two, number two on the Billboard chart for a week of December 25th, 1971 was Family Affair by Sly and the Family Stone, which is awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, Sly and the Family Stone's cool. They will always be cool.
Yep.
Um, this Melanie song's kind of interesting.
Okay.
It's not bad.
Not bad. I'm gonna have to check it out.
No,
Yeah.
it's not.
I don't know it.
It's not bad. It's not, the greatest thing I've ever heard, but it's not bad.
Yeah. I'll have to check it out. Yeah. I'm not familiar at all. So yeah, number one, Melanie Brand New Key. Number two was Sly and the Family Stone Family Affair. And then number three, I know we usually don't do number three, but I gotta do it because number
That's
three
okay.
was American Pie by Don McLean, which I love that song. That's a really cool song. That is a really cool song.
Um, no, that is a cool song. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at a fact I know about that song that I will not tell you because it will ruin the song for you.
Then don't tell me because it's a pretty cool
I
song.
will not tell you.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But if anybody would like to know the
Yep.
fact that I'm
Email
referring to,
Sam. He'll tell you.
email us at
Yep.
um, oh, I forget the email, but it's in the description of the podcast, so
That's right.
it's very easy to access.
Click.
Email, ask what it is, and I will tell you, and I will not show you the email.
Fair enough.
And I'm referencing Paul that I will not show the email to. But if
Yep.
you would like to know, email us, and I will tell you.
My parents had this album. I can picture this album. They had this. They had this album growing up. They used to play it all the time. American Pie. Yep, Don McLean. All right, and then for on repeat for me, it's just been a bunch of Coldplay because that's what we decided to talk about. So I've been listening to Coldplay. Like I've been kind of walking around humming Coldplay songs and mixing up the lyrics and getting the songs confused. And so now that we've done our Coldplay episode, I think I'm going to take a little break from
You've
Coldplay.
listened to more Coldplay than I would recommend in this
I,
time period. I mean,
I've
they're a
listened
great
to
band, but
Yeah, I've listened to Coldplay like for the last like 11 days. It's been a lot of Coldplay. So,
that's
yep, take a little break. Well,
um,
Sam, this was a good episode. This is fun. Fun talking about Coldplay.
yes,
Yep.
I agree. Just to give you my quick answer for on repeat.
Oh yeah,
'Cause I've had a
please.
couple different things going on here. There's like three things I've had on repeat.
Yep.
Um, this record, I'm a big Sonic Youth fan.
Yep.
I love pretty much everything they've put out, and I've been listening to one of the members of Sonic Youth when they broke up like 2011, 2012, and one of the
Mhm.
members put out an album called No Home Record. Kim Gordon, No Home Record.
Right.
Um,
Yep.
I've really enjoyed that. Sounds nothing like Sonic Youth. It's a really
Mm.
really cool record. I've been listening to that a lot lately. There's a Neil Young live album I've been listening to a lot lately
Okay.
called Young Shakespeare. It was a solo acoustic performance that he put on in 1971 at the
Wow.
Shakespeare Theater in Stratford, Connecticut.
Okay.
It's
That's cool.
haunting. It
Yeah. Oh, he could sing. He could sing when he was young. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you
That's
have
awesome.
not listened to Young Shakespeare, listen to it. He's touring on After the Gold Rush. That just came out, that album,
Yeah.
and he was, workshopping songs that would end up on Harvest, the next
Yeah.
record.
I love that album. Okay, I have to check
Um,
this out. Yeah.
yeah, definitely check out Young Shakespeare. It's
Yeah.
fantastic. And I've been on a massive kick with this band Can. I'm also a big fan of the band Can. They're a group from the 70s. They're German. They're very avant-garde musical anarchists is the best word to put it.
I'm okay with that. How do you spell it? Is it CAN?
CAN. Yep.
Mm. What is it with
Um,
you and like kitchen stuff? First it's spoon, now it's can.
yeah. See, there's a
Yeah,
method to my madness. I'm just
there is
into
a
kitchen
method
bands.
here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can. German, huh? Okay.
Yeah, they sing in English a lot. Just to give our listeners a little bit of not to drone on or anything, but to give our listeners a little bit of context for what Can's deal was and what made them so special is that the way they did everything was different. The way they wrote, recorded, performed live was completely different. They would not sit down and write a song. What would happen is that they would pick up their instruments in the studio,
Mhm.
jam nonstop from
Mhm.
6 to 12 hours
Wow.
straight, no breaks,
Well, I mean, they're German, so
and
that's
then they chop it down to the best 5 to 20 minutes, and then that would be a song. And then when they would go out and tour, like, they weren't performing songs off the album, they would just
do opening.
improvise one long song, like, they have been known to put on 6-hour concerts. Like, Can were completely insane, and I love that band a lot for that.
Yeah, I am not familiar. I'll have to check that out.
And
Yeah.
that's pretty much all I've had on repeat lately,
Okay.
other than
Alright.
Coldplay too.
Yeah, a lot of Coldplay.
A lot of Coldplay.
All right. Well, this
Alright.
has been a great episode. I hope that you guys really enjoy the Coldplay, our deep dive. This is a deep dive for Coldplay.
Deep dive. This was
Yeah,
fun.
that was really fun. Um, if you guys are listening to the podcast and have any suggestions, hit the email link. Let us know if there's any music you'd like us to talk about or feature on the show. Also, if you're passionate about music or passionate about an album or a song, you should come on Generation Gap as a guest. Even if you only
Yeah.
want to do like a 10 or 15-minute guest spot, we'd love to have you.
That would be awesome. Yeah. Our email is in the podcast description.
There you
I
go.
can't remember it for the life of me. I'm blanking right now, but it's there, and you can just
There.
click on it, and your email will open up. So,
Perfect.
um, all
That's the easiest
right.
way to do it.
Yep.
All right, Sam. This was
All
fun.
right.
See you next
This was
time.
fun.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.